Introduce myself. My name is Maggie Buckley. I've been with the Ehlers-Danlos National Foundation, which is now the Ehlers-Danlos Society, since 1991. I did serve on the board. I do a lot of advocacy work, and I represent the society at some professional meetings and in pain advocacy arenas as well. It's like that one. Thanks. All right, so I move around a lot. I talk with my hands a lot. So if I need to come back to the microphone, somebody just wave at me, let me know in there. You'll notice two things about the introductory slide here. One, I have an MBA. And two, there's another Maggie who's not here. So as many of you know, with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which Maggie and I both have, sometimes mornings aren't our friend. So we aren't always reliably and predictably showing up for things. We're incredibly intelligent, though. We know how to do research, right? This is one of the smartest groups of people you'll ever meet. I do have an MBA in accounting. I also have an undergraduate degree in social work. So that's why I got drafted into doing this and my long history with the organization. So I have no financial disclosures. What we're going to cover is we're going to take a look at the article in the original, or the 2017 classification, Bulbena et al., and the body of published research since then. Next, we're going to look at the main mental health care issues that people seek treatment for, and finally, we're going to talk about the role of mental health support in a comprehensive EDS management program. So since the publication of this article in the revised classification in 2017, we have been cognizant of the fact that there are a lot of psychiatric and psychological issues that, as Megan said, there's an overlap between the physical conditions and the mental health things. So it doesn't mean that every time you have anxiety, it is a mental health issue, and it doesn't mean that every time you have anxiety, it's a physical health issue. Most likely, it's a combination of the two. So recognizing that, learning to deal with it, et cetera, is very important. So to update this presentation, because the last 2 years, Dr. Bulbena has reviewed this article and his findings and his clinical observations, et cetera, with his patients, I enlisted the help of a medical research writer. And so if you look at the keywords on the bottom, they're pretty much focused on this population. So we expanded the list of keywords, again, on the bottom, down there. And we were looking for cohort studies to see if there were any larger studies. And there are some articles out there. This one, what's interesting about this article is that not only did they find that the people with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome had some psychiatric disorders, they found that children within a family who were unaffected, like they didn't have the EDS, they were in fact affected in some way. So there was a higher incidence of mental health issues than in the unaffected population or an unaffected family. Multimorbidity and depression. You'll see here we removed Ehlers-Danlos syndrome from the keywords, and we were looking at chronic illness now. So there's some clues for you to do your own research on an ongoing basis. And if you have any more questions about clinical research, I would encourage you to reach out to Megan, who spoke earlier, because she's excellent at that. So here, again, adding more keywords. These keywords included specific mental health care issues, trying to collect more information. So what does the research show? Basically, it sucks to be sick. Anybody going to argue with that? So it shows that because just like in any other chronic illness, there's going to be a higher incidence of anxiety and depression, eating disorders, catastrophization, neurodevelopmental issues, post-traumatic stress disorders, suicidal ideation. And research to now has specifically linked anxiety and neurodevelopmental issues, and I'm going to go into each of the different mental health issues that I have put here in a little more detail in a moment. So this, where am I in my notes here? Sorry. It's too early in the morning for me, too. There we go. So this paper includes a nice chart, a nice description of neurodevelopmental attributes, which I'll talk about a little more in detail later. And in this research, by this report by Marco Castori and Alan Hakim, and Dr. Hakim is here and will be speaking later, the most valuable thing that I found in here, or the most important thing, or the thing that gave me the most hope, was that they're saying, yeah, we need more research. We need to include psychiatric issues as we're going forward. And I'm the patient voice in the room sometimes with these doctors or these researchers as they're planning the research projects, and it keeps reminding them of that. They want to look at a particular symptom, and I'm saying, do a psychological assessment at the beginning, at the end, and a 6 or 12-month follow-up with your study cohort, and you're going to get publishable data that will help delineate not only the physical symptoms, but the mental health support needs for this population. So, is mental health care needed for Ehlers-Danlos syndrome? Anybody say no? Yeah. So it's been pretty important, and it has literally been a lifesaver for me personally. So first up, we're going to talk about anxiety. We're all familiar with the symptoms, and anxiety is a feeling of worry, nervousness, unease. It's typically about an imminent event. We get anxiety as something comes closer to us, either in space or time. An event like speaking today, I'm sure Megan had some anxiety. I know her very well, so that's why I keep picking on her. But anxiety can be managed. So you look at the treatment options, and I'm always going to be talking about a multimodal, integrative treatment model, because no matter which symptom we're talking about, whether it's pain, whether it's a mental health issue, whether it's a dislocation, there's not one thing that's going to fix it. It's always going to be several things. Anxiety, I get a little bit of anxiety whenever I dislocate something. I'm 56. It's happened way too many times. And I know that medication may come into play. The things that are going to be most valuable to me are the mindfulness and cognitive behavioral therapies that I've had before, and calling on my mind-body connection and movement and placement and posture and things that I've learned with the physical therapist. So take that full list there and always think of those categories of what can I employ in any given situation in there. So we know that anxiety is an issue. It can also be a physical cause. Anxiety is a symptom in dysautonomia. Anxiety is a symptom, a precursor to a heart attack or a cardiac event or stroke. I am a stroke survivor as well, and I can tell you that, yes, anxiety is a major, major precursor to such an event. So your healthcare provider should be doing the differential diagnosis in there. Depression is a mood disorder that affects how you feel, how you act, and how you think. So if symptoms last longer than 2 weeks, a diagnosis of depression should be considered. There's the blues, you're feeling down, getting down, and as Crystal said, you can always find a way out of it. And again, multimodal treatment options. Of course, there's antidepressants, there's psychotherapy options, there's ECT, and there's lifestyle changes in there. Sleep management, sleep regulation is very important. Work with your physical therapist about how to align your body for the maximum comfort and relaxation. Work with your psychotherapist or your counselor or whoever to talk about how to mitigate all of those thoughts that start crowding in your brain, etc. Come up with a routine for sleep management. Every night you go to bed at the same time, in the same way, with the same set of actions leading up to falling to sleep, and stick to it. Get up at the same time every day, go to sleep at the same time every day. It's really challenging. And one of the big revelations to me with my counselor was, it's okay if you wake up during the night. It doesn't mean like you start the clock over again to get the sleep. Just don't focus on the worry and the anxiety and the depression. Oh, my pain's going to be worse because I didn't get enough sleep or whatever. I know that I have to go to bed at 9, or at 10, I'm going to get up at 7, and somewhere in between there, I'm going to accumulate at least 7 hours of sleep. And I have little coping things. So you need to try a few things, figure out what's going to work for you or for your child. Eating disorders get very, very complicated in this population. There's a lot of reasons why eating is problematical. This is the chart from Bulbena's 2017 article in the classifications package. So you look, and there's a lot of reasons: food intolerances, GI problems, dental problems, TMJ issues, pain, dysautonomia. There's all kinds of reasons why it's difficult to physically eat, or the body's response to food is very complicated. So posture is important. I know that I have to sit a certain way, and that if my head is a certain way, I can't swallow, nothing will go down. My throat just completely is closed off. I am celiac and allergic to dairy since back before it was fashionable. So I do have a fear of eating in public, for example. I don't know who's done what to the food, sort of thing. So taking eating disorders very seriously in this population and looking to avoid them before they become problematic or a maladaptive coping tool. I know several kids that won't eat green things in this population because of all of the GI disruption and reflux, and it's a matter of too much fiber in the one that I'm thinking of in particular. And it cracks me up. And so once I made cookies for her and dyed them green, because her rule was no green food, and the cookies were out there on a plate. We told her she could have as many as she wanted. And then she had to rethink her no green food cookie rule in a different way. So there's ways to work with children to create healthy eating habits, talking to them, helping them to figure out, as I've had to, what's the right posture, what's the right position, what's the right timing. Is it small meals? Is it no liquid for a certain amount of time before or after, or is it with liquid? There's a lot of variables. Again, each one of us has our own set of issues, and we have to come up with a customized treatment plan. And that treatment plan is going to be all trial and error. You're a science experiment, all into yourself. N=1, right? See, this is a really smart group. You guys know what I'm talking about here. So catastrophization is usually mentioned in the context of pain. And catastrophization is that thought process where you predict a negative outcome, and then you jump immediately to the conclusion that if the negative outcome does in fact happen, it's going to be the worst thing ever. It's going to be inevitable. As Zach had described with, before his colostomy, he thought this is going to be the worst thing ever. And because of that thought process, when it actually did happen, he was not on board. He was not accepting it. Unfortunately, he was a child. Other children are cruel, and that just reinforces all of that. So somebody might think, why should I bother? If it's only going to get worse, then I'm not even going to try. If physical therapy is going to hurt, I don't want to go back. So learning to talk therapy is part of expressing all of those negative thoughts, just getting them out there instead of holding them in and letting them marinate. Counseling, cognitive behavioral therapy, coming up with new cues and clues of how to overcome these things. And again, sleep management is very good with catastrophization. And that's because the more rested you are, the more resourceful you will be, the better able you can think about options or possibilities, the more open you'll be to trying new things, something a little bit differently. So that's someplace that can be very, very helpful. Very much, you can get a lot of help in this healthcare department. So neurodevelopmental disorders. All of these symptoms, especially in the rarer types, are physical manifestations of the gene defects, as Dr. DePep described for us earlier. There's the hypotonia, the low muscle tone. There's the motor delays. So many of the people with EDS that I've met in my life did not learn to walk until they were a few years old. That's quite common. And coordination, because no matter what type of EDS you have, it's like going through the world not being able to control your limbs, sort of being lost in space, etc. So you need to make sure you get a differential diagnosis, a full differential diagnosis that takes all of these things into account. So it's going to be the genetics team, it's going to be the physical medicine team, it's going to be the physical therapist who's going to be evaluating those proprioceptive functions, and also that's who's going to be treating them, whether it's a mental health issue, a neurodevelopmental issue, or a genetic disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder. Anybody in this room familiar with that? Yeah. I hear that a lot. So post-traumatic stress disorder is a psychiatric disorder that's most often discussed in the context of soldiers and violent crime, etc. It does happen in the medical setting. So this is when you have a repeated unsatisfactory result, or more than unsatisfactory, horrific or painful result in participating in a place or in a formal setting like a doctor's office. So PTSD is something that is documented in the research that people with chronic illness often feel or often experience, and this is why. People with PTSD continue to have intense, disturbing thoughts and feelings related to their experience that last long after the traumatic event has ended. So in my own history, I was treated horribly by a neurologist in my very early 20s, because there's a lot of neurological issues that we have to deal with. And I was told, there's nothing wrong with you, physically you're fine, I'm not even gonna do a nerve conduction study, stop wasting my time. And then because I've been a very good personal healthcare advocate, I always got copies of my healthcare records. And this was a long time ago, before the electronic medical record, where it's much easier. So I would have to go to the hospital office and put in the request and pay the 5 cents per page per copy and get the copy. And then I saw that he wrote in there a full list of psychological disorders that he felt I had. So neurologists, for me, was like a trigger. Every time I'd get a referral for a neurologist for the next 5 years, I would just ignore it because I could not go. I could not even consider it. So I realized, with my social work background, that this was impeding my personal health care, and it was endangering my health because I had limited feeling in one of my arms. And so I decided to ask for a referral to counseling. And I had this great counselor, her name was Ida Barber, and she talked me through it. And she said, I went in, I told her what the issue was, I said, I have to overcome this, I gotta figure this out. So we practiced for 8 weeks what I would say and she would take the role, it was a role-playing exercise, of the neurologist. And at first she was a jerk neurologist, and by the end of the 8 weeks, by fine-tuning what I was saying and what I was asking and how I was behaving, she got me very confident, and you could see that in her role as the neurologist being responsive to my requests and understanding and compassionate. And then, so 2 weeks later, my neurologist appointment came up, and I went. I met the wonderful Dr. Jeffrey Klingman at Kaiser in Walnut Creek, California. And 30 years later, we still have a fabulous relationship. I can text him. I have his personal phone number. He trusts me that much. That's how good that relationship with that neurologist is. So I encourage all of you to think about that as a coping tool. So this is where I pause, and I mention that in the chronic illness world, suicide ideation is a very common thing. I have lost a brother, an uncle, and about a dozen friends to suicide. So I want to make sure that I treat it seriously, and I share that experience with you to sort of underscore how real it is. In my family, because of my brother and my uncle, we have a house rule, family rule, and I'd like for all of you to take that home and think about how you can incorporate it into your life. Always be kinder than necessary. Someone actually gave me a sign that hangs in my front hallway. Always be kinder than necessary, because people with mental illness are more susceptible, or people with chronic illness are more susceptible to the mental illness issues we've discussed, such as depression. People with mental illness are more susceptible to suicide. That doesn't mean that everybody with a diagnosed mental illness is going to commit suicide or attempt suicide. It simply means that we have to be more supportive. For friends of mine that have not been successful in their attempts at suicide, they've come back to me years later, in some cases, and said, you know, the thing that made the difference is that you sent me that email message. You made that phone call. I got that card in the mail that day from you. And those are the messages that stick with me. And so for the people that know me, that are in my life, they know they get random messages or emojis at random times, just to let them know that I'm thinking of them. So I'd encourage you to do that. I would encourage you to become familiar with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention in this country, and they have some really good graphics, et cetera. And this slide deck will be available on the website, and if you need it before then, certainly let me know and I can email it to you. It has all the presentation notes in a lot more detail than what I'm covering here. And then this is the graphic that they have for what to do. It's a step-by-step list of actual actions that you can take. So all of the research and everything leads us up to, not only is mental illness tied with chronic illness, it's tied with pain. And all of the conditions, mental health issues that we've discussed are actually amplifiers of the type of pain that we are all experiencing. So when you're thinking about pain management or pain, don't just think pills and procedures, because that's all that's covered, right? We want to think instead in terms of using all of the options out there. Mental health support, physical medicine, ask for the referral, let them know what you're asking for, look back at the treatment options that we presented before, all the different varieties. Maybe you've never tried cognitive behavioral therapy and you want to try it. Definitely. Tell them that's what you're interested in. You're in control in your healthcare, so you don't have to ask for a referral and accept the first provider that they send you to. You can contact that office, send them an email or call on the phone, ask what they cover, tell them what you're looking for. I want to try group therapy. Can you help me find a group for chronic illness, etc. So I always think of the referral now, based on my wonderful experience with Ida Barber, as a golden ticket. Because these things suddenly become available, and they apply not just for mental health, they apply for physical health. The communication training that I mentioned is in there, the guided imagery. How much time do I have?
5.5 minutes.
Oh, perfect. So, guided imagery, here's another one of my great coping tricks. If everyone could just close their eyes and think about at your home, in your yard somewhere, there's a tree or a bush. So visualize that. Pick out one of the leaves that's there. And as you're doing this, just relax, breathe in very slowly. Hold it for a second, and then let it go very slowly. Now think about that leaf and focus on that leaf. Is that leaf staying still? Is it waving back and forth in the breeze? Is that leaf in the sun? Does it feel warm? Is there rain or dew? Does it feel wet? Can you imagine what it feels like to be that leaf? Are you warm? Are you cold? Are you floating, supported, because you're anchored to that tree, to that branch? You're sort of loose, yet you're safe. You're anchored to the branch. And the wind comes up, floats you up, floats you down. Take a deep breath in. Take a deep breath out. Open your eyes very slowly. So for less than 30 seconds, you forgot completely about your pain, the world. You're just focused on that image of that leaf and trying to experience what all your senses would be, what information that your senses would give you if you were that leaf. So that's an example of guided imagery. That's an example of a healthy dissociative activity that you can do. I'm so uncomfortable and unhappy with where I am right now. I think I'm just going to float like a leaf on the breeze for a moment. So that's two things I've given you. Be kinder than necessary, and just float like a leaf on the breeze. Just take a little, 20, 30-second vacation from what's going on. And then you can come back a little restored, a little better prepared for whatever's going to come at you. Moderated peer support groups are great. There's people with all kinds of chronic illnesses that have all kinds of things to share with you. So I would encourage you not to limit your search to just an EDS support group. I would look for other chronic illnesses and other rare disorders to find, because we're all accessing the same services. We're all going to the same specialists for similar symptoms. So embrace that. Ask them for help. For some people, talk therapy is like the worst thing that they want. For others, it's like the platinum ticket because they're so cognizant of the fact that they have worn out their family. Their family doesn't want to hear any more of it. Their friends don't want to hear anything more of it. So asking for a psychotherapist to do talk therapy is like a platinum ticket of you can just unload it all there, leave it there, and go on your way. So I want to thank you, let you know that this is all available. The resources, here's some websites of ways to find healthcare providers or more information. The American Psychiatric Association and the American Chronic Pain Association, the ACP, that word is wrong, society, I need to correct that. Both have resources to find providers. The ACPA has in-person support groups for chronic illness. The pain community at the bottom there has online resources. There's a chat room that you can drop in and talk to people with pain. It's free to join. You create a screen name just like you do on Inspire with EDS, and there's discussion forums you can contribute to. And they have a weekly telephone call on Tuesdays. Another resource that's not on here is the U.S. Pain Foundation. They have a weekly phone call that's moderated by a social worker that takes you through exercises, specific exercises. That's on Thursdays. So there's a lot of options for you to find help and resources. And then the references in here, as you can see, are 10 pages, and that's just skimming the surface of the most recent articles in there. So you will have access to that, as I said, online in there. So that's it, and I'll be on the panel later for questions. So just write them out and give them to Laura or someone at the front desk, and we can talk about that.